Shabbat Shalom. There's a very powerful message in our Torah portion this week. Well, not referring to the portion itself, but to the name of the Torah portion, because this week we read Emor. Last week we read a double portion of Acharemot and Kedoshim, and if you take those portions and read the titles, the names of the parasha together as a phrase, it says the words Acharemot, Kedoshim, Emor, which means after the death of the holy ones, after the death of the martyrs, you must speak out. And that's exactly what we did this week, and that's exactly what the global Jewish community has done in the last week, and that's exactly what so many across the world have done in speaking out about the death of Sarah Halimi, which occurred 4 years ago, the brutal murder of a Jewish woman in Paris, a 65-year-old retired physician and kindergarten teacher, brutally murdered. And this past week, the French courts determined that her murderer would not stand trial because he was high on marijuana, because he had smoked prior to the murder and therefore wasn't in his right mind, and therefore there will be no criminal charges. That last semblance of justice, the hope that justice will be served for her family, for the French Jewish community, for the global Jewish community, will not happen because of the French court's decision. And of course, people across the world are upset, and here in Montreal is no exception to that. And I'd like to share with you a video of a visit that we made this past week together with Rabbi Reuben Pupko, Rabbi Mark Fishman, I, and a few other representatives of the Shar HaShamayim community and of the Francophone community at Shar HaShamayim, visited the French consulate in Montreal as a way of expressing our indignation and showing just how upset we were about this lack of justice. And listen to our words before we were removed by security from the French consulate.
Bonjour, nous sommes debout devant le consulat de France à Montréal et nous sommes ici pour nous souvenir de Sarah Halimi, Emir Knoll, Ilan Halimi, et Philippe Braha, et Johan Cohen, et Yoav Hatab, et François Michel Saada et d'autres. Tous étaient des juifs assassinés en France parce qu'ils étaient juifs. Et nous sommes ici avec indignation, car la réponse pénale en France est insuffisante et inexistante. Any of us would be honored to have Sarah Halimi as a neighbor, as a retired physician, kindergarten teacher, someone who contributed in meaningful ways to society, but her neighbor in Paris was bothered by one thing, qu'elle était juive, that she had a mezuzah, a symbol on her door saying that she was Jewish, and therefore he brutally murdered her and threw her body out the window and will not stand trial for that brutal act of antisemitism. Justice would be the one comfort for her family. But in France, there is no justice because the murderer had cannabis in his system. They've given a license for anyone to kill. As long as they're smoking, there will be no trial. We're upset, and the whole world should be upset. Nous félicitons le président Macron d'avoir déclaré que ce système est injuste, et nous appelons à la société française et les citoyens du monde à exprimer leur indignation et à exiger justice. May the memory of Sarah Halimi be a blessing.
As Rabbi Scheier mentioned so importantly, that this is not the first time. I remember gathering in 1992 after the bombing of the restaurant, the Joe Goldenberg restaurant. I remember gathering in 1990 after the desecration in Carpentras. We gathered in 2012 with Ilan Halimi, and we gathered in 2017 with Sarah Halimi, Miriam Knoll in 2018, with the Hyper Caché murders in 2015, and now in 2019, the attack on Alain Finkielkraut at the Yellow Vest protest. This is going on way too long. Jewish blood cannot be shed with impunity. Jewish blood is sacred. All human blood is sacred. And for a man who murdered a woman after torturing her and throwing out a window or walk away from court is unconscionable in 2021. France should be a center of human rights, dignity, and liberty. And instead, they have allowed a murderer to go free. No Jew can remain silent. No person of goodwill can remain silent. We all owe Sarah Halimi more. We owe her justice. We owe her the dignity of being remembered in the right way. And we owe the people of France and the Jews of France a world which cries out for justice and demands that they be secure and that they be safe. In 1896, Dreyfus trial put on. Alfred Dreyfus accused of crimes of being a spy in the French army. And at that trial, people started saying, death to the traitor, death to the traitor. And Theodore Herzl famously wrote in his diary that in that moment they started chanting a different chant. It wasn't death to the traitor, it was death to the Jew. And in 1896, in France, the chant of death to the Jew was to form Theodore Herzl's seminal moment, where he would go home and write that evening in his diary, the Jewish state was founded in France in this evening. Because in the great country of France, if there was not to be a democracy, if there was not to be justice, if a Jew could be seen as a traitor and death to the Jew was the call of the hour, then Jews of France were not safe. With Sarah Halimi's death, and now a process of justice not being done at the highest courts, we protest and we say we do not stand for this. We are here today to say respectfully and in the democracy of Canada, the Jews around the world protest this travesty of justice. We are here peacefully, respectfully, and in accordance with all of the appropriate limitations here. The mask will kindly go on. Absolutely. When we say that Jewish blood is not cheap, we say that Jewish rights in a democracy of France is something that we support and stand for, and is something that we will always rise our voices up against. We thank you for your time, and this is something we bring to the entire community of the Jewish community and the broader non-Jewish community of Montreal. We stand with Jews around the world today in this travesty of justice. Thank you. Finisher? Yes. You have to leave.
Our teacher, Rabbi Avi Weiss, taught that in the verse when God says to Cain, after he murders Abel, says, Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama, that your brother's blood is calling out to me from the earth, from the land. And the word for blood is in the plural, demei. It's a plural, your brother's bloods. Why? Because as Rabbi Weiss taught, that blood is shed twice, once in the moment of the murder, and a second time if there is no justice. It's as if the blood is spilled again. And we will do everything in our power to ensure that this travesty of injustice doesn't continue, is not allowed to continue. And we invite our community to express indignation as well. Write a letter to the Consul General of France to Montreal at 1501 McGill College Avenue. Write a letter to the Ambassador of France to Montreal. Let them know how upset our community is, how upset Canadians are, and how we insist that the blood of a Jew, of a Jewish woman, is not cheap, that no one can get away with murder because of nuances in law, and that the law must be changed, and that justice must be served. Stay healthy and well, and stay connected. Shabbat Shalom.
We try to infuse as much ruach, as much spirit as possible, especially on Shabbat day. That is why around the world it is traditional in many homes to sing zmirot, to sing songs around the Shabbat table. And perhaps one of the most famous of these songs, the Zemer, is called Ya Ribon, God, Master of the Universe. It was written by Rabbi Israel ben Moshe, who was born in Damascus in the year 1555. Later on in his teenage years, he moved to Tzfat, the epicenter of mysticism. And mysticism played a great role in his life and influenced many of the poems and songs which he wrote. That is also why this song, Ya Ribon, is written in Aramaic and not in Hebrew, as that was the language that was used by the mystics. Ya Ribon, Olam ve'olamaya, ve'olamaya, Antu malaka melech malchaya, melech malchaya. Ovad gevurtech ve'timhaya, shefar kadamach le'achavaya. שבחין אסדר צפרה ורמשה, צפרה ורמשה. לך לה קדישה דיברה כל נפשה, דיברה כל נפשה. עירין קדישין ובניהן השחבת ברע ואופי שמיה. יא ריבון עולם ועולמיה ועולמיה. אנטו מלכה מלך מלכיה מלך מלכיה. רברבין עובדך ותקיפין ותקיפין. מכיך רמיה וזקיף כפיפין וזקיף כפיפין. לא יחיה גבר שנים אלפין. לה יהול גבורתך בחוש בניה. יא ריבון עולם ועולמיה ועולמיה. אנטו מלכה מלך מלכיה מלך מלכיה. אליה דילה יקר ורבותה יקר ורבותה. פרוקיה תנח מפורמה יבתה מפומר יבתה. ואפק יתמך מגוגלותמך. תבחרת מכל אומיה. יא ריבון עולם ועולמיה ועולמיה. אנטו מלכה מלך מלכיה מלך מלכיה. למקדשך טוב, למקדשך טוב, למקדשך טוב, ולקודש קודשין. למקדשך טוב, למקדשך טוב, למקדשך טוב, ולקודש קודשין. תרדי ויחדון בי ויחדון רוחין ונפשין. תרדי ויחדון רו ויחדון רוחין ונפשין. רוחין ונפשין, רוחין ונפשין. ויזמרון לך שירים ורחשין בירושלים. קרת שופריה. ויזמרון לך שירים ורחשין בירושלים. קרת דשופריה. יא ריבון עולם ועולמיה ועולמיה. אנטו מלכה מלך מלכיה מלך מלכיה.